afternoon, and welcome to Jeff and the Rabbi. Well, Rabbi Freeman, I hate, I'm a young guy. I'm not that old. I'm kind of a young guy. But I sometimes feel like I'm forever young. But sometimes I feel like, that old man that sits out in front of the rocking chair, out in front of the barber shop in the little small town, and says, son, you kids today, you've just totally ruined society. When I was young, we had to walk 6 miles in the snow just to get to school, and you guys today, you take advantage of everything. You have no rules. You have no regulations. I kind of feel like that sometimes. I'm looking at society. In this short period of time, let's just say 6.5, 7 years of time, things have really changed. Back, say, 7 years ago, the country had big problems. We had international Islamic terrorism. We had people blowing up buildings. We're in war in Iraq and people dying. We're worried about Islamic terrorism. The economy was bad. We were worried about oh my God, where are we going to get a job? Is the economy going to get better? All the things like that. That's what we worried about. Now today, it's 7 years later, we still have, in fact, Islamic terrorism is a problem probably quadrupled, maybe 10 times worse than it was then. The economy is worse. But if you ask people what the problems are today, well, climate change, global warming, all these things like that. I'm getting so confused. Things have changed so much. Like right now, our biggest issues are like gay marriage. We have to change the definitions of marriage. We now have to. There's no borders on our southern border now. Anybody can come on in. There seems to be no definitions anymore. No definitions of anything. A definition of a terrorist state. You can't even call someone a terrorist, much less an Islamic terrorist, because you might offend them. You can't call them that. These people that have come across the border, we used to call illegal aliens. Now they're undocumented workers because they could be offended even though they're breaking the law and coming across. I'm real confused about it. I don't know who's who, what's what. The biggest thing, in the history of the world, the biological definitions are now leaving me changed. You can't call someone today a man or a woman. There literally are laws now. In fact, the Department of Justice just passed a law saying in all public schools now, however you feel that day is the bathroom you can use. You feel like a woman, go in the girls' room.
I wonder when they get to 2020 and they do the census, how are they going to define how many people there are? And I wonder if asking the question of are you like males and females, don't they I think they take a census in the country how many males and females there are? I think it's prejudicial even to ask the question.
Well, they actually don't. My daughter was actually filling out, she had to get a parking pass or whatever at the University of Alabama. And Alabama still said you can say man or woman, but then if you choose, there's another drop-down bar about this long of different definitions beside man or woman, and I'm not sure what they were, but big, long definitions. And it's at the point where, it's crazy. People don't know what they are, who they are, and you're not allowed to. So I think in California already, and it's going to happen in the rest of the world, you can't use pronouns. You can't say man, he or she. And a Democratic congresswoman, I think, just was proposing a bill to get rid of the terms husband and wife, because that is prejudicial.
I tell you, I was just recently on the phone with someone, and I was trying to change some information on an account that my wife has with a particular large corporation.
Right.
And the person on the other end, I was going to say which sex the person on the other end was, but why should I? Anyway, the person on the other end of the line didn't want to really give me the information because I was saying that I was, and I gave my wife's name.
Right.
And they kind of suspected that I wasn't. And you know what? I was going to say, where do you have the right to suspect? You think, what do you mean? How can you say that I'm not her?
And these days, you're right.
Because I sounded like a male? Who says?
And what is a male?
Maybe she's a male.
But it's a good. And more importantly, do we even have the definition of male anymore? And there's got to be a reason in society why don't we have these definitions? And then Rabbi Friedman emails me last night, and I thought things couldn't get worse for me in my confusion. And Rabbi Friedman tells me now, people are vampires. People define themselves as vampires.
Right. As soon as I saw this, you were the first guy I thought of. I said, you are an absolute caveman.
I am.
You're a caveman because, you think that because you're now accepting the different definitions of gender and you've now accepted marriage between you think that you've made it now. No way. You are living as a caveman.
And I knew it, but when you hear this, I'm thinking, okay, vampire, does that mean at least do you have to be bitten by another vampire before you can say you're a vampire? Because that's how it works in the movies that I saw. Or you now just say you're a vampire.
No. Listen, you don't have to do anything. Listen, if someone proclaims themselves as a homosexual, do they have to have had? Like, what if you have a child, like a kid that's, decides, comes into school one day and says, that's what I am. Now, they haven't necessarily even had any interaction with the other sex, but they've decided that, So.
Well, Mark, he's filming the show here, just told me a story about a friend of theirs that he's 3 years old. Wears a dress. The little boy wears a dress because he wants to wear a dress.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're 3 years old, I guess you know.
Yeah.
I mean, because my 5-year-old nephew thinks he's a transformer now because he wears the thing. Is it the same thing? Do I have to now call him a transformer? If you got to call this a girl, I think I got to call my nephew a transformer.
Absolutely. And I think that it's really all of our obligations to get on board.
That's my problem. I'm always I'm Johnny come lately here. So thank God you're here today to discuss what I need to know.
I have important information for you that you don't know, but I've got important information. Right. And this is a study. Now, this study was done by D.J. Williams, the director of social work at Idaho State University, and published in the July issue of the peer-reviewed journal Critical Social Work.
Yeah, I have that. I have that copy on my
right.
desk.
Now, by the way, I do have a psychiatrist. I shared this with a psychiatrist friend of mine, and he looked it up, and he found it's in his medical journals also.
Right.
So this is the real thing. I mean, this is mainstream stuff. I'm not talking about, you think I'm trying to make fun. But no. I'm being very serious, and I want you to know that vampires are real. Yes, vampires are real. Not the ones from the movies, because that's ridiculous, because that's not really fair.
No one will believe that.
No one will believe that. Come on, right. Human beings who self-identify, and I want to emphasize that word, self-identify as vampires, and may drink blood or sleep in coffins. Now, they may or may not, by the way. Maybe if they don't even drink blood and sleep in coffins, but if they the key is self-identify.
I've been having a lot of that.
Right. Self-identifying is the main thing. Don't let anyone else identify you. You have to self-identify. And once you have self-identified, it's everyone else's obligation to respect your self-identity.
Logical.
Right.
I can believe that.
And not only that, we have to be understanding of these people because these people need, and I quote, as much psychotherapy and medical help as the rest of us. So vampires also need it, right? Poor vampires. Now, what the problem is that the poor vampires, they found that many of these vampires were reluctant to come out to clinicians. They're coming out of the coffin. Right? That's what I was saying. I go back in the coffin, right? They were reluctant to come out of the coffin to clinicians because they were fearful about being labeled as being psychopathological or perhaps wicked and not competent to perform in typical such social roles such as parenting. Now, that's a big problem. They're afraid. That once upon a time, like in the army, they had don't ask if you're a vampire and don't tell.
Right.
But, that is so old because at the point, the vampires were afraid to come out because they thought that the other people, if they were sleeping in barracks and stuff, people might feel uncomfortable.
If they're hanging upside down from the
but now we find, but it's really the obligation of everyone else to accept this self-identity of the other person.
I do.
And the vampires are afraid that people might say that they shouldn't really be parents. Maybe there's something wrong with them being parents, and maybe they wouldn't want them to become parents or take their children away, or maybe they wouldn't let them adopt children. So they're kind of reluctant. However, luckily, and really our thanks to D.J. Williams, the director here of social work at Idaho State, because he and his staff persevered and they interviewed a number of vampires, and they found out that these people that they interviewed, they seem to function normally, based on demographic questions concerning their psychiatric histories in their social and occupational roles. And some have achieved considerable success in their chosen careers. So the bottom line is really, it's really a private thing what they do. As long as the blood that they obtain is consensual,
Right.
And
not from children. Not from children. Hold on.
Right.
No, I don't
not from children. Right.
Draw a line.
This is right. That's I think you're probably right.
16 and over.
Now, exactly what is the age when children need to be introduced to the options of drinking blood? So that, because maybe there's a child there in society,
Kindergarten.
because of all the restrictions, society is not letting a vampire really come out and find themselves. And the poor child's going to grow up all conflicted because when he got to school, they put out milk. And this kid, like, he just, he never liked milk. All the other kids were drinking milk. He really wanted to drink blood.
And his parents should probably encourage that at an early age, I would assume.
I
You
would
want to
hope
be
so.
who you are.
I would hope so. It would seem to me. So what is William's advice? He advised that clinicians should view vampirism, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
That's the way I say
Yeah,
it.
okay. From the prism of being an alternative identity. See, that's the thing that we have to realize. There are alternative identities, such as similar to those adopted by goths, other kin, and furries.
Okay.
He theorized that rapid advances in technology provide a social environment conducive to the development of unique and unconventional identities.
Right.
And there is the key. You see, our society is speeding ahead at such a pace that it really is not allowing people the traditional identities just don't work anymore, and people are coming up with their own new identities. Now, this might make it a little bit confusing because, you'll sit down next to someone.
Why would it get confusing?
Yeah, right. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that you were a vampire. Now, he said, we should not be surprised to see a proliferation of non-traditional identities in the future.
Question.
Yeah.
A serious question. So
this is all very serious.
This is very serious.
You think I'm making fun of this?
No, I know you're not.
This is serious.
But to relate
there are
this
people's lives online, and people take this casually. This is for real.
I actually have a prediction, and I want to see if this is correct. So obviously, give you an example. We have one more State of the Union coming up in January for this president, and you know how you always have the most courageous human being sitting up there next to the First Lady. Is it possible that this year we will have a transgendered vampire sitting up next to the First Lady at the State of the Union address? Is that possible?
You would think. I would think so.
I
think it should be.
But what is the difference? And I know this. I don't like to offend. You know that.
Right.
But what is the difference then? I mean, it sounds like vampirism. I got that right. Vampirism.
Yeah.
Is probably like, would you call it like a fetish type thing? It's kind of, I feel like a vampire, I am a vampire. What is the difference that between that and the man, who is definitely a man, who dresses in women's clothing, who is now our new civil rights case in America? Is there a difference? Mm-hmm. Do we treat a vampire less than we treat the transgender? Mm-hmm. Is there a vampire community? There's a transgender community.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the truth. This is the deal, because once you allow for self-identifying, and once you say that what you do is what you are, right? So then, whatever they want to do, that's who they are, and they have the right to self-identify. No longer can a society designate that you are a male or you are a female. No longer can a society designate that this is the way that males and females interact. If a person wants to, you could say that if a person wants to change their body, they've changed it. Once upon a time, that's called a man with a mutilated body. Now it's called a sex change operation.
Wait, so I'm confused, and let me make sure I got this right. So in other words, if a man says now that he's a woman, you have to, you now can lead in the dance when you're dancing with that man. This man now 100% is a woman and gets all the rights of a woman in society. So let me ask you a question. You being an unbiased guy, if I say I'm an orthopedic surgeon, are you going to let me operate on your back?
No. But I do have to respect you that you're an orthopedic surgeon. And if I should...
But if you don't choose me over another orthopedic surgeon, isn't that kind of racist?
Right. And you know what? If I would think that, you're practicing and I think that you're a charlatan and you're hurting people, and I would speak up and say, don't go to this guy, he doesn't know anything. Where do I have a right to say that?
You really don't.
Right. And not only that, orthopedic surgeon is not something that you do, it's what you are. That's what you are, and you have the right to self-identify as such.
I feel like one.
So now I've got a couple of vampires move in next door.
Right.
And I'm feeling uncomfortable because I don't like vampires hanging around my kids. I think they're going to start sucking blood. Well, guess what? Word's going to get out that I'm telling my kids I tried to prevent those people from moving into my neighborhood, and I keep my kids away from them. I think what's going to happen is that somebody's going to come along and take my kids away from me because I am clearly teaching, raising children to be prejudiced. Now, then the children might be adopted or taken into the foster home by the vampires next door because, of course, who says that they can't be good vampires? As a matter of fact, that self-identified vampires work regular jobs and participate in the broader community in which they live, like people in the mainstream.
Wow.
So
there is a chance right now there could be vampires among us right here in my office today.
Absolutely.
They're just
absolutely. Because you have such a regressive atmosphere here, they're afraid to come out.
Well, so what do you have against vampires then, Rabbi Freeman? I guess it's really now about you.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned.
Right. So here's the bottom line. The bottom line is that once upon a time, and I actually think even now, people universally believe that vampires and vampirism is kookiness. And it really is the stuff of sci-fi movies and horror shows and stuff like that, but not for long. And that leads me to think now, while we still have vampires in the kooky category, let's stop and think about some other people and other definitions that were once upon a time deemed kooky, but then reached the mainstream, whether they had to go all the way to the Supreme Court for it or whatever. And don't we have to say to ourselves, can a society that allows the liberty of everyone to self-identify, and can a society that allows the liberty of everyone who is whatever they do, can any society like that function? Can it maintain itself? Like Abraham Lincoln would say, can it long survive? Can a society like that last? Is it possible? Because if we're doing this and our society is completely obsessed absolutely and totally with every new definition, then what's going to happen is, soon enough, the next generation, kids growing up now, are going to be searching for a new definition. And what everyone's going to do is, you're not just like a straight male. Come on. Come up with some definition. Be a furry. Be a vampire furry transgender. Be a something.
Just not a Confederate vampire furry transgender.
That's right.
Okay. I want to throw that out there for our viewers. Go ahead. Sorry.
Right.
That's right. Interrupt, but I just want to make sure.
Right. Although, for the next session, I'm thinking maybe we could get this together. It'd be a great TV show. I was thinking of getting all the jihadis and all the Confederates and doing a big war. Just put them on the battlefield.
A reality show.
A reality show, like the jihadis against the Confederate. They go with their flags and they're, bombs and guns and, it'd be great. Rebel yells versus, it'd just be wonderful.
It'd be great.
Yeah. But, that's for another show.
Different show.
Right. But anyway, this is the bottom line. And I want you to know something. He says, like people in the mainstream, self-identified vampires may deal with stress, various health issues, relationship difficulties. Can you imagine, some guy's in this relationship and his mate, spouse, mate, doesn't really, not so into him, like drinking their blood or something like that. Education or career transitions and various other struggles that people commonly face. And we have to all appreciate that. So if our society has come to that, this is what I would say. This is my last hurrah. Well, the world still thinks that vampires are creepy.
For a little while, yeah.
For a little while longer. Well, it still thinks that vampires are creepy. Can't we stop and say, what about all the other creepy people? Soon, vampires will be the mainstream. Then there'll be something after that, and something after that, and something after that. And where are we going to be left? So someone say, listen, it's all good. Let them self-identify and self-identify and self-identify. It can't go on because no one will be able to function with each other. There will be no ability to cooperate. There will be no ability to act as a team because people will be so obsessed with their own self-definitions And everyone will spend all their time before you can collect any data or make any decisions. Instead of putting one bathroom in the building, they'll have to put 100 bathrooms, or just one bathroom. And then what's going to happen inside that one bathroom?
So pretty much what you're saying, when there's so many definitions, you really get to a point where there are no definitions. I mean, there is no clear definition of anything anymore, because I don't know what you're a shapeshifter right now. You're shifting your definitions as we speak.
Right.
So
I predict, this is my prediction, just looking at the historical curves of society, that we will continue to strip definitions from society. What will happen after a while is it will become so painful and so difficult. For example, there won't be separate sex washrooms anymore. And there will be so many things going on, so much hurtful things going on in every time. After all, people will be terrified to use the public restroom, because who knows what you're going to run into.
First, you'd be confused because you don't know where to go. Second, you're going to be freaked out because you know what's going to be happening.
And after a while, people are going to start to get sick and tired of it. And then what's going to happen is they're going to turn to some regressive totalitarian regime that will bring law and order back to the streets, and people will say, well, you know, they are a little bit crazy, but they are keeping like they said to Mussolini, but he keeps the trains running on time.
Yeah, guys, this seems like a history lesson.
Yeah.
First you were talking about the future, now you're talking about history.
Yeah, he keeps the trains running on time, and they're going to embrace that, and then everyone's going to go, oh, this is horrible, totalitarian, and they're going to start putting people on those trains and sending them off to, and then you're not going to be happy about that.
Yeah,
here we go again.
I think you've nailed this one. I think you've got some fact behind you in this one. But the thing is, the most important part of this thing is that is a true story you're talking about here. You're not
Absolutely
making this up about the vampires.
Absolutely
right?
true. I want to read this again. The peer-reviewed Journal of Critical Social Work, published by Idaho State. D.J. Williams, the director of social work there, and his co-author was Emily E. Pryor, researcher at the College of Canyons, and they interviewed vampires in the United States and South Africa, by the way. I did find, like I said, I had a psychiatrist check this out, and he found it also quoted in some of his journals. Now, I want to say, what is the antidote to all of this? So I believe that the antidote to all of this really is, and this is what I tell people, certainly I tell Jewish people, is that it's important to embrace truth, because what's really happening here is that we have taken away truth, and we've in essence said there is no truth.
Absolutely.
Anything that is just is. It's no truth. If I say I'm a vampire, I'm a vampire.
The truth to you is a little different than the truth to me.
Right.
The truth to him.
Right. Truth means nothing. So I say we get back to truth, and for truth, there are certain things, there are certain truths that have been around for a long time. And those truths, they stand the test of time. And they will stand the test of this time also. And when this time is gotten so sick and tired of itself that it can't deal with itself, because you won't be able to say hello, good morning, and then you can't say anything more, right? And pretty soon there'll be animals and people and vampires and goths and who knows what. And people just will be afraid actually to walk out the door. So once they've taken down society, you'll come back to all of those timeless truths. And the Torah, which is what I peddle, the Torah is one of those timeless truths. And it talks about a world of divisions and distinctions, but a world of dignity, and a world of godliness, and a world that is elevated, in a world where people strive to accomplish good things because they were created to do those things. A world that has a beginning and an end, and then there's some order in it. And that is what people are going to embrace ultimately, and that's what anyone in a day and age such as this, when you feel that everything has lost its moorings and is just floating around, then you have to grab for something that is solid and has been there for a long time.
Wow. Good message. I'm not going to say it's right now that, I'm nervous sitting next to you when you give a message like that, because that's not safe right now in society. But it's a good message. And you know what? Historically, that happens too. Yeah. We usually come back to there at some point. So
historically, Jews have been, proponents of the Torah have been out of the mainstream. Now, the mainstream has changed a whole bunch of times, but whatever it was, the Jews oftentimes found themselves out of it. So being out of this mainstream is no surprise, and that's the way life is.
No, I can't agree. And listen, and we have to accept there are boundaries, there are definitions, and the Torah gives great ones. I mean, not easy to live by all of them, but you know what? They're there. So
that's right. And perhaps we have to start off really by getting after this self-definition, self-defining. And maybe it's time for society to come back and say, you are defined. You have a skin color, you have a certain anatomy. These are things that are facts. And facts are facts. You can try to change all that, right. But I think that I don't think that Michael Jackson was Caucasian.
No.
It might have tried to change his.
He looked like it a little bit there.
A zillion times, and a number of nose jobs later, and all that. But when they took out the DNA and they would analyze the DNA, I don't think he had Caucasian DNA.
Same with the head of the NAACP, the woman out in out west.
Right.
She was definitely a Caucasian woman.
As soon as they can get that DNA to start lying, then maybe they'll have something. But right now, the DNA is going to tell the truth.
I gotta agree with you there. Well, interesting. I think this one's take to heart. Just listen. Sometimes we go a little bit too far, or all the times we go a little bit too far in society. All right. Well, from Jeff and the Rabbi. Good evening.
Yeah.
See you next week.